So, hello everyone, both offline and online students who have come here to attend this lecture on answer writing frameworks. So, as part of the Sure Shot mains and Step Up, we are offering 10 lectures on answer writing by myself. And in each of these lectures, we will be covering subject wise and we will be discussing the template of answer writing, the strategy for note making, the probable topics, most probable topics, which are many of them are valid this year and next year also, and the keywords that can be added in your answers to score marks. See, understand one thing, that most of the students of mine who have got ranks and many other rankers also, there's one thing common among all of them, that they had all had a framework or a template of answer writing. You can't really go on the spot and think, what should be my introduction, what should be my main body. You should have some kind of, before prepared template that you can use in your answers. So for every topic, for every introduction, main body and way forward and conclusion, there should be at least 8 or 9 types of templates that should be readied by you. And depending on the kind of question, depending on the nature of question, depending on your retention, you should use one of these 8 or 9 type of templates that you have prepared. Because you have to write answers in 8 minutes. And you can't really think on the spot कि अब मेरा intro क्या होगा, मेरा conclusion क्या होगा, मेरा main body में मैं कैसे point generate करूँगा. It's humanly impossible to do that. Or if you are doing it, then definitely the quality will suffer. So it's very, very important that you prepare them beforehand, because it ensures uniformity in your answers. It also ensures that when you don't have much knowledge about the topic or the theme, you can still at least write an average answer. See, you can't write extraordinary answer in each and every question. But the whole idea is that at least you should write some kind of answer. Right? So the first lecture we are, first lecture we are keeping it open for everyone, and this is how the lectures are scheduled. So you have every 5 days we have one lecture for all the subjects, and the people who are enrolled in Sure Shot and Step Up will get these lectures. And the new batch is starting from 10th of July 2024 for this year mains. So in this there will be 10 such lectures along with 1-to-1 mentorship and other features like tests. So let's start with polity first. So let's start with polity. Now in polity, when we talk about, the first thing is the introduction. Now introduction is very important, the reason being that it is the first thing which the examiner sees before he actually judges your quality. So it's the first impression that you create on an examiner's mind. So if we talk about introduction in polity, in mains, there are mota 7 types of, or 7 templates of introduction which you can use in your answers. Right? So if you see the last year PYQs of polity, jitne bhi question you will actually see ki out of these 7, one can fit in every question. Right? So you don't need to go beyond these 7 ways of introductions. The first is you start your answer with context. Recent news. Right? For example, this question was asked by UPSC. Examine the scope of fundamental rights in the light of latest judgment of the Supreme Court on right to privacy. So you will start your answer with the recent context, the Puttaswamy judgment and all. Similarly, this question was asked, critically examine the Supreme Court's judgment on NJSC 2014 with reference to appointment of judges of higher judiciary in India. Again, here also you will start your answer with the recent context, the recent judgment. So mostly in many questions where you have some recent news in knowledge. For example, if the question is asked on Election Commission, so you can start your answer with the recent, Anup Beniwal case. Similarly, the second way to start your introduction in polity is you start with the article. Right? So, for example, you have this question, discuss the role of Vice President of India as the chairman of Rajya Sabha. 2. So, in this question, what you will do, this was actually asked by UPSC last year, right? So, ultimately, what you will do, you will start by mentioning that Article 63 in India has a provision of Vice President. You will start with that. Or let's say this question was also asked by UPSC. Right of movement and residence throughout the territory of India are freely available to the Indian citizens, but these rights are not absolute. Comment. Now here also what you will do, you will start your answer by mentioning Article 19(1)(d). Right. Third is, you start your answer with defining the term. So if the question is asked on, let's say, constitutional morality, when the question was asked by the UPSC, there was this question asked, if let's say question is asked on judicial overreach or judicial legislation, anything like that, any technical word, then you should start your answer by first defining what exactly do we mean by the term constitutional morality. It's very clear. Fourth and very important is court and Supreme Court judgment. This is very important, that you start your answer with a court or a Supreme Court judgment. Now, when we talk about court, you can either quote any constitutional expert or jurist. So in Lakshmikant, we have so many of these quotes that are given. Granville Austin, Ivor Jennings, K.C. Weary, so many of them have commented on different bodies or different parts of the Indian Constitution. So you can start your answer with this. For example, if the question is asked on federalism, you start by saying that Indian federalism is unique in that it integrates the diverse and pluralistic society of India into a single political unit while allowing it for sufficient regional autonomy. Or it could be, by Ivor Jennings, India's constitution is quasi-federal in nature. The units have restricted autonomy and the center has the power to override them. But the structure is federal, not unitary. So you can start your answer with this kind of a quote, right? Second way you can do it is by quoting Supreme Court, observation or judgment, right? For example, Justice P.N. Bhagwati talked about that Article 21 embodies a constitutional value of supreme importance in India. So you start your answer, if the question is asked on right to life or if it's asked on Article 21, you can start your answer with this, right? Similarly, let's say if the question is asked on right to health, so you can start your answer with the Supreme Court judgment in the state of Punjab and Oath versus Mohinder Singh Chawla. The apex court reaffirmed that the right to health is a fundamental to right to life, right? So you start your answer with that, right? Or let's say if the question is asked on transgender or paid news, you start your answer with mentioning in the introduction itself that recently in XYZ case, Supreme Court has, talked or it has given this kind of observation, right? Fifth is, you start with report index data. Now this is where you have to, for example, this question was asked by UPSC. Discuss the desirability of greater representation to women in the higher judiciary to ensure diversity, equity and inclusiveness, right? So if you see this question, you should start by mentioning that, with the data that how Supreme Court of India has only 4 sitting women judges out of 33, which is just 12% of the total judge population. Or let's say if the question is asked about, let's say, parliamentary, that how parliament is weakening over the years. So you start by mentioning the data of, productivity, that, in the recent Lok Sabha, the number of days that Lok Sabha sat was just 80, 90 or anything, right? So ultimately, that is there. Sixth way is you start with evolution. So let's say if a question is asked about a topic that has evolved over the years. So you start your answer with that evolution part. For example, if the question is asked on PIL, you will start your answer with what? You will start your answer with mentioning that how PIL emerged in early 1980s through the intervention of Justice P.N. Bhagwati and V.K. Krishna Iyer. Or let's say if the question is asked on colloquium, you start your answer by mentioning that how it has evolved after the third judge's cases. So evolution, through that evolution, you can also start your answer when the topic is something that has evolved over the years, right? It has evolved through the processes. So you mention that process in the introduction itself. Then seventh, like keywords. So for example, if the question is asked on civil services, so you start by mentioning how Sardar Patel called civil services as the backbone of Indian administrative services. So something like that. With these keywords also you can start your answer. Now this is all about introduction. Any doubts here? Okay, we'll take it in the end then. Now let's come to the main body. So introduction, you will fit out of these 7, you have to fit the introduction based on the demand of the question and based on how much you can recollect. That's also important because you know that this is not the most apt introduction, but at least this is what you can recollect. And at least this is from the 7 kind of templates that I have prepared. Now main body. Now if you talk about main body, first thing that you should keep in mind is that whenever there is any keyword that is involved in the question, keywords like democracy, keywords like social justice, keywords like governance, when you have these kind of keywords which is there in the question, your objective should be to break that keyword. For example, the question is mostly asked like, let's say electoral bond in India helps in deepening democracy in India. Now the keyword here is deepening democracy. Now what you need to do is you need to keep in mind that what are actually the elements of democracy. You should keep in notes all these keywords, democracy ke elements kya hai, good governance ke kya hai, social justice ke kya hai. And then you see that which of the following of these elements electoral bond is actually helping to achieve. So that's how what you're doing, you are actually just like maths. We have LHS equals to RHS in algebra. Same way, the question is subjective, but you're trying to make it as objective as possible. Because what you're doing, you have identified the elements of democracy. Now you're going to prove that these elements are being fulfilled or promoted by electoral bond. And that's how you are proving that electoral bond is deepening democracy in India. For example, this question was asked by UPSC last year. Constitutionally guaranteed judicial independence is a prerequisite of democracy. Comment. Right. Now, if you see this question, the keyword here is democracy, which says that democracy, will remain only when there is judicial independence. Right. So these are the 2 keywords. One is that democracy will only remain when there is judicial independence. Now what you will do, you will first identify the elements of a functioning democracy. So it could be popular sovereignty, free and fair election, protection of minority rights, rule of law, civil liberties and human rights, transparency and accountability, separation of power, independent judiciary. Now these are the key features of a democracy. Out of them, you can just match which of them are being actually promoted by a free and fair or independent judiciary. So for example, if you talk about the first is separation of power, which is a key element of any democracy. So Supreme Court, because it's independent, that's why it has given this SR Bomai mein, it has talked about the importance of separation of power. Similarly, rule of law is another key feature of any democracy. Now through Keshwanand Bharti case, Supreme Court has put a limitation on the powers or the amendment powers of the Lok Sabha. Protecting minority rights, that is again a key feature of a democracy. So for that, Supreme Court has initiated with PIL. Independent Supreme Court has started with PIL. Free and fair election, again a most important feature of democracy. Supreme Court through Lily Thomas case, Anu Barnwal case. Civil liberties and human rights, so many cases Supreme Court, Vishakha judgment, Puttu Swami, so many of them, right? This aapka, that one, transgender one. So many of these judgments Supreme Court has given to promote that. So now what we are doing, we have proved actually that yes, if the judiciary remains free and fair, then definitely democracy in India will be saved and promoted. So that's how you actually break it up. When you see the keyword democracy, social justice, just think in that direction. And it's very important that आप notes में इन सारे terms के democracy, social justice, good governance, you at least create 10-15 points कि ये हैं. Now, out of those 10-15 points, 4-5 points you can match with the demand of the question. Right? And that's how you do it. Right? The second thing in the main body that we need to identify is significance. So when you write a main body in a polity answer, mostly you have significance, you have the challenge, you have the way forward, and then you have the conclusion. So mostly mota the structure of the answer is like this only. You have introduction, followed by main body mein you have significance, challenge, way forward, conclusion. So when we talk about significance, now in significance, these are the things that should be there in your answers if you want to score 130 plus in GS2. Right? The first element which should be there in the significance part while writing a polity answer is that data to, mostly data to substantiate your point. In many questions, purely static question, there might not be scope for that, but in many questions which are linked to contemporary, like Panchayati Raj, like any other thing, NGT, tribunals, you have to have data to substantiate your points. Now, why I am telling that, because when I will be talking about the note making strategy, these things you have to keep in mind. Similarly, second thing that you have to keep in mind while writing a polity answer is that example and case studies you have to add in your answer. So be it urban local body, be it any other body, be it the question of governor, you have to ensure that you substantiate your point. If you are doing in favor, significance, you actually give an example or properly a case study to actually justify or to actually back up your points. Otherwise, writing those static points from Lakshmikant, it will give you only average marks. We are aiming here for above average marks. So for that you have to add some value to your answer. For example, this question was asked by the UPSC, discuss the role of presiding officers of state legislature in maintaining order and impartiality in conducting legislative work and in facilitating best democratic practices. So here, ultimately, you have to mention the examples where a presiding officer has been maintaining order, Karnataka, Orissa, etc. Third and very important, this is very important, and if you have any doubts, I'll explain it again. To generate more points while writing main body in polity, you can take this constitutional value approach, which means you think about it, that what are the constitutional values of India, of the Indian Constitution? Equality, justice, liberty, inclusiveness, democracy, human dignity. These are the main values. You can add more values. I'm just giving an example. Now, when a question is asked of polity, you also have to think in these lines. How that institution, how that body is promoting the constitutional value. For example, if the question is asked on Panchayati Raj, you have to mention how it is promoting the value of inclusiveness, it is promoting the value of justice, it is promoting the value of democracy, it is promoting the value of human dignity, right? Or let's say if the question is asked about anything, CAG. So out of these 6 values, you can identify 1, 2, jo bhi fit hota hai. But the whole idea is that, see, we have to write points. Now when we have to write points, we have to take help from all these directions. ठीक है ना? 1 point, what you can do, 1 point probably आपने दे दिया example का, 1 point आपने दे दिया data का, बाकी points कहाँ से आएंगे? बाकी points यहाँ से आएंगे. That you are, thinking from the constitutional value lines. कि, among all these values, which is the value which this particular institution or body actually promotes. Okay. Then fourth is government agenda. I am telling you how you will generate points. That's how you will generate points. And by following this, in some questions, when you don't have exact points, you'll still be able to write an answer. That is what my focus will be in your course, that even if you, because there is unpredictability involved. You can't really think कि जो आप पढ़ के गए हो सिर्फ उस पे question आएगा. There could be questions asked from areas which you might have not prepared well, but you have to be have some strategy to tackle these questions. So government agenda से, for example, question is asked on Lok Adalat, so you can link it up with Saptarishi goal, that it will promote Saptarishi goal. Why? It will promote inclusiveness, right? Or let's say, so many things are there. Viksit Bharat is there. Amrit Kal, right? Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas. So many of them are there. Government agendas. So you can say this XYZ institution or body will, or initiative will actually promote this government agenda of the government, right? Similarly, one more area through which you can generate points for main body in polity is how it benefits the section of the society. For example, who are the sections? The marginalized section, the women, the SC, ST, the minorities, the tribals, disabled, right? So if there is any, let's say again, let's talk about Panchayati Raj only, women empowerment is there, tribal empowerment is there, right? Dalits, right? So at least 1 or 2 points you can generate through this approach. That's how, see, you have to write 6-7 points. तो वो कहाँ से आएंगे? To think from these dimensions. One is constitutional value wala dimension. One is society wala, how it benefits society. One is data. One is, example. Right? One is government agenda. Right? So through that, you will be able to generate 6-7 good points of different dimensions. Right? Then constitutional and legal provisions, that also you have to write in main body, that what are the constitutional and legal provisions, what are the constitutional and legal provisions associated with, for example, if the question is asked on RPA Act, so you have to talk about what are the constitutional provisions, what are the legal provisions. Then second part of main body is challenges. First part is significance, second part is challenge. So when we talk about challenge, again, first thing is data. So let's say the question is asked on freedom of speech or internet shutdown. You have to back it up with data that, last year according to the NCRB data, so many shutdowns have happened. You have to give the number. Or if tribunal is not working, you have to mention, back it up with an example that why tribunal is not working. Or let's say if you talk about Panchayati Raj, you have to back it up by saying, or if you talk about, let's say, parliament, you have to back it up with the data that why parliament is not functioning effectively. Or let's say if the question is asked about parliamentary standing committee, you have to back it up with data that how, the number of bills going to the parliament is so less. Second is case study. Now case study, again, you have to back it up with an example. Urban local body, challenges, you have to mention. Panchayati Raj, you have to mention that except Kerala, none of the states have allocated 21 functions that have been allocated to them under the 73rd and 74th Amendment. Third is Supreme Court judgments. If you have any observation, you can add up in the challenges part. For example, in right to protest, Fahima Shireen case, the Supreme Court observed that public spaces cannot be occupied indefinitely. People have right to mobility. People have right to mobility. Right? So ultimately, this is something that you can mention. Then contemporary examples. So if the question is asked, let's say on governor, you have to mention how the recent cases of Tamil Nadu, Maharashtra, Kerala. So that is also something that you will see. This is also how you will make notes. When I will be talking about the note making, I'll take it from here only. That's how you prepare a topic, right? The whole idea is that note making is, again, if we call mains as a war, note making is your arms that you have. If you have inferior arms, you will certainly face defeat. And if your arms are strong, definitely you will get success. And I can see perfect correlation between good notes and good score in mains. I mean, if last year I was analyzing some of my students' copies, and I've said that perfect correlation. All my framework and everything will only work well when you back it up with content. If you don't back it up with content, then definitely I'm not responsible for you not scoring well. Right? Then you have the keywords. So, for example, if the question is asked on colloquium, Uncle Judge syndrome, all that, it violates constitutional morality, it violates democratic principles, justice delays is justice denies. So all these keywords can also be, mentioned in the challenges part. Then quotes, for example, on Panchayati Raj and the local bodies, Manish Shankar Iyer said that instead of decentralization of democracy, we ended up with decentralization of corruption. So that is also something that is, that you can add up in the challenges part. Now let's come to the way forward part. So in way forward, try karo, you need to try that at least these 3 things you should add in your polity answers. 1, recommendation of commissions and committee, of many of them, at least 15 are important for polity, starting from second ARC to the Law Commission to the NCRWC, Punchi, Sarkaria, right? And then you have many of them for the elections, Tarkunde Committee, Indrajit Gupta Committee. And so one is that. Second, Supreme Court judgments. If Supreme Court has given any recommendation, you can mention that in the way forward part. And third is international best practice, which is linked to comparisons. For example, if the question is asked on parliament, effectiveness, you can talk about the UK model where they have one day in a month where the opposition decides the agenda of the house. So we can have some model like this, right? Or the shadow cabinet model that we have in UK. So many of these best practices we can add, right? Now, when we talk about conclusion, now again this is very important. The reason why it is very important is that this is the last thing which the examiner sees before he or she gives you the marks. So you have a good answer, but you end up with very, very normal sober conclusion. You'll definitely lose that half mark, 1 mark extra. And mind you, when you're giving mains, half marks, 1 marks can decide your fate. I mean, there are people, I have some people who have enrolled who have missed IS by 1 marks, half marks, 2 marks, missed their dream job by 2 marks, 1 mark. So every half mark, every 1 mark is important in this exam. So conclusion and way forward, what is the difference? Way forward is that you are giving suggestions, right? You are giving the suggestions that these are things which are needed to improve that functioning of that body or institution or XYZ. Conclusion is that if these steps are taken, then what exactly we'll achieve? What is the final goal that we'll achieve? Right? So way forward is that you are giving the suggestion, but conclusion is that after implementing those suggestions, what are the things that you are looking forward then? Right? What is the goal that you will achieve if these steps are taken? So here there are 6-7 ways, just like introduction, there are 6-7 templates of conclusion in polity. The first is that you can link it to either fundamental rights. DPSP is very important. DPSP, for example, this Article 38, it says the state shall strive to promote the welfare of the people by securing and protecting as effectively as it may a social order in which justice, social, economic, political shall inform all the institutions of the national life. So basically welfare, right? So many of the questions related to schemes and everything, institutions, you can end up with that these above steps, if taken well, will help us achieve the goal of DPSP as enshrined under the Article 38. Right? Or let's say if the question is asked on Panchayati Raj, you can end up with these steps will take these steps will go a long way in achieving the goals as enshrined in under Article 40, which is the Gandhian value. Right? Similarly, preamble, you can link it with the values of preamble also. Justice, equality, fraternity. Justice means you have economic justice, social justice and political justice. Right? So these steps will go a long way. For example, if the question is asked on, let's say, district legal service authority or probably Lok Adalat, what does it do? It will, help us in promoting what? It will help us in promoting justice. Right? Social justice, because it's mostly the poor people who are more involved in that. Similarly, you can link it up also with some keywords. For example, one keyword is life with dignity. Now, this can be used in questions like transgender, disabled, all these people who are marginalized, tribals. This can be used there, that these steps will go a long way in ensuring or providing life with dignity to that group of people. Right? Last minute delivery. Right? Similarly, these key governance values can also be used in the conclusion. For example, accountability. So you can say that if the question is asked on CAG, you can say that these above steps will go a long way in ensuring that government remains accountable to the CAG for its fiscal matters. Could be a keyword, right? Similarly, separation of power is another keyword can be used in the conclusion, that if let's say question is asked about collegium or judiciary, you can say that these reforms, if implemented, will go a long way in promoting the value of separation of power that is enshrined in the Indian Constitution. Right? Similarly, ultimately, you can also link it up with constitutional article in the end. For example, if the question is asked on right to protest, so you can mention this, that Article 19, therefore, Article 19 should be balanced with Article 51A, that makes it fundamental duty of every citizen to safeguard public property, abjure violence. Right? And lastly, you can also end your answer with government agenda. Like for example, let's say question is asked about criminalization of politics, money politics. So you can end up with this, that Viksit Bharat needs Swasth and Saaf Rajditi, something like that, Hindi quote. You can do that. Or Amrit Kal era requires XYZ. And in this regard, above steps need to be implemented. Right? Then also you can also end up with quotes. For example, Tarkunde committee had said that election commission should not only be independent but also be seen as independent. So you can, after the question is asked on election commission, you can mention that thus, as Tarkunde committee observed, that election commission should not only be independent but it should be seen as independent. In this regard, the above suggestions need to be implemented. Right? Similarly, you can also link up, you can link it up with a phrase. For example, if the question is asked on uniform civil code, you can end up your answer by saying, thus, as law commission observed, a unified nation does not necessarily need to have a uniformity. Very good phrase. That also justifies your stand. Right? Or you can also use some acronym in the conclusion part. For example, if the question is asked on competitive federalism, so you can end up your answer with 4C approach. Thus, along with the above measures, a 4C approach is needed, which include convergence between center and state schemes, collaboration at 3 levels, center, state and local, champion of change, which is local heroes that are implementing it on the ground, and competition among districts based on real-time data to build a strong team India. To build a strong team India. So this can be used in the conclusion also in some of the questions. Depending on whatever you are remembering, depending on what is the kind of question that is asked, you will use out of what I've talked about almost 7 or 8 types of introduction I've told, conclusion I've told you. You can use any of them, right? Now let's come to the next part. After this, we'll also use governance. No, we should never use flowcharts in the conclusion. Completely, it is a taboo thing, right? Now, so after this, we'll also do the governance because there is similarity between polity and governance approach, but definitely there are some areas which governance is very different. How much word for conclusion? Not more than 3 lines, 2 or 3 lines. How to make notes for polity. This is very important. So mostly we have shared the templates. Mahesh, we can use flowcharts only in the non-core part. I have been emphasizing that from a very long period, that flowcharts only in non-core parts, not in the core part of your answer. Core part has to always go through, points. How to make notes for polity. So again, we will divide that through introduction and all. The whole idea is that here I will teach you how to make 1-pager notes because that is something which is very important. That is, something which is very, very important. Yes. How to identify the non-core part. So ultimately, the core part is what? If the directive is there, that is the core part. If let's say there is a passing statement, for example, this year a question was asked that e-governance assures transparency and that's XYZ, but it suffers from some limitations. Identify those limitations and way forward. Now, identify the limitations and way forward. That is the core part because that is the clear-cut directive that is given by the question. But the first part, which is a passing statement, it is a non-core part, right? Sometimes what happens in a question, there is a keyword that is asked, but that keyword is not exactly, asked upfront. So the keyword you can address through, for example, let's say a question has a keyword of e-governance, right? But the question is asked in a different context. So what you can do is you can just mention the aspects of e-governance. That's a non-core part, right? Okay. Ultimately, if we talk about notes, so again, the whole idea is that 1-pager notes is what you need for the mains exam. Almost all the toppers that I know, they have all had a 1-pager notes. And the philosophy behind these notes are that you will make notes in a way like you write an answer. So whole idea is that the template of note making, is basically similar to the template of answer writing that you have. Because the objective behind these 1-pager notes is that you directly replicate whatever that you have in your notes. You vomit that in the actual exam, right? So when you are preparing a notes for a topic in polity, you have to keep in mind what are the things that I require, what are the content that I require in the introduction part. So I'll mention that some. What are the content that I require in the main body part? Let me keep that. What are the content that I require in the conclusion and the way forward part? Let me keep that. That's all. If you have two things for each part, you can write a good answer. See, generic points of essay you will write. But these value addition points, your 1-pager note should only have those value addition points. That's how you can make those crisp notes. Otherwise, so your notes will go very bulky. If you write कि prose में ये हैं, these are the 7 prose, these are the 7, it will become very bulky. Your 1-pager note should be in such a manner that it should help you in writing the answer. For example, if you talk about polity, introduction में, when you are preparing any topic of polity, introduction में, you should see that you have 1 or 2 good quotes related to that topic. Right, as I've said again, Tarkunde committee, अगर election पे आप notes बना रहे हो election commission में, तो this is something that you can use in the introduction or the conclusion part. Second thing that should be there in your notes in polity is data, right? For example, again, if the question is, if the topic is judiciary, you have to have a backlog data. If the question is, ultimately Lok Sabha, so Lok Sabha productivity data, the disruption data. Third is article number, because as I have told you many times, you have to start your answer by mentioning the article, which is there in the body. Fourth is if there is any recent context or if there is any Supreme Court judgment, because again, Supreme Court judgment can also be used as a part of your introduction. So I think these are the 4 things that you require in your notes to fulfill the introduction part of your answer, right? Similarly, if we talk about the main body part, for the main body part of that topic, these are the things that you actually need to have in your notes. You need to have again data to substantiate your points. Then you need to have constitutional article, Supreme Court judgment, again, if there are more such judgments, contemporary examples, जैसे case studies, Chavi Rajawat and all, government schemes linked to that topic, for example, judiciary के लिए या और किसी चीज के लिए, and legal provisions, constitutional provisions, and schemes for that topic. What are the legal provisions that we have regarding this, which means any act? What are the constitutional provisions that deals with that matter? And what are the schemes that the government has launched for that? ठीक है ना, just one line में, ठीक है. Similarly, for the way forward, these are the things that should be there. Again, just 1 or 2 will do enough for you to write a good answer. So, committee recommendation, best practices, Supreme Court judgment, if there's any international convention that has recommended something like Nelson Mandela rules on custodial torture, then if there is any acronym which is there, you can use that, 4C, 5D, etc. And if we talk about conclusion, mota quotes, if you have good quotes, for example, on prison reforms, Supreme Court judgment said every saint has a past, but every sinner has a future. Good, very good quote, can be used in the question of custodial torture, right? Thus, as Supreme Court rightly observed, that every saint has a past, but every sinner has a future. In this regard, the above reforms need to be implemented on the ground, right? For example, if the question is asked on corruption, then you can quote Modi ji's statement, no ifs and buts or no double standards when it comes to dealing with corruption and terrorism. So in this way, prepare quotes for that topic, for introduction part and the conclusion part. Okay. Now, the third thing is important topics for polity for this year mains. Many of them are valid for next year also. Now, I did a lot of PYQ analysis of last 10, 11 years, and based on that, I have identified that there are certain themes, there are certain areas from which UPSC has been asking question every year, or if not every year, it is asking every 2-3 years. So these are the, I would say, the topics for which you need to prepare really well. You need to prepare really well. You need to have very good notes. You need to have a very good template of answer writing, right? So first is commissions. So every year they are asking few questions from commissions. Women pe they have asked, backward class pe they have asked. So these are the certain commission, and human rights may they have asked. These are the certain commissions that they have not asked till now. So there is a high chance that might be asked this year. National Commission for SC/ST, Law Commission, National Commission for Minorities, CVC and NCPCR. In parts pe abhi tak they have not asked till now. And as you know, the trend that UPSC has is that they have been asking one question from the commissions. So definitely there is a high scope that you actually prepare content for these 5 topics. Similarly, important judgments of Supreme Court. Important judgments of Supreme Court. So ultimately, as you know, last year they had 2 questions from, one was the environmental wala, second was right to life. So 2 questions they have asked last year from the Supreme Court judgments and all, how it has evolved. So these are the areas, again, definitely one question so they will ask this year also. This is the trend that we have. So gender justice is one that they can ask. Social justice per se, they can ask how Supreme Court has enlarged social justice in India. Environmental activism they've asked last year, so it might be not that high priority. Right to life and liberty also they've asked. Freedom of expression is also one area. Decriminalization of politics is another area that they can ask with respect to, thing. Police reform is another area that they can ask how Supreme Court has made that. Elections, this was very much in news because of the new act and new bills and the whole controversy. So they can ask about elections also. PIL is another area which, Supreme Court can be, they can ask. Federalism, how, Supreme Court judgments have, it has strengthened the federalism part in India. Independence of judiciary is another area, how Supreme Court judgments have promoted that. Then you have, so these are the main areas they have to see, kaise evolved हुआ है from 1950s. Third is fundamental rights is another area which is important, and these 2 debates we are seeing very much in news. Right to personality and reservation on the basis of religion. This was very much in news during the Lok Sabha also. So prepare good content for this also. Then fourthly, one question they are asking basics from Lakshmikant. Every year, one question they are asking basics from Lakshmikant. For example, Vice President they have asked, Speaker they have asked, Attorney General they have asked. Pure basic, pure factual, no analysis needed there, right? So they have not asked President till now, and that could be asked this year. Election procedure they have not asked much. So I think these are the areas that, at least जो basics हैं लक्ष्मीकांत से factual procedure of the main bodies जो हमारी constitutional bodies है जिन पे the question has not been asked. I think you can use that, or you can prepare at least Which one? Okay. This? Okay. Right? So ultimately, one question they will definitely ask from the factual part of Lakshmikant. Lakshmikant ko brush up kar lo, at least process and everything. You should brush up so that ultimately you don't miss these easy questions, because these are like these are the full toss that UPSC throws, and you should hit for 6. You can't afford to have a poor content in these questions. Similarly, comparison of Indian Constitution with the rest. This is another area which UPSC's favorite area. UPSC's favorite area. Every year, one question they are asking from comparison of Indian Constitution with the other constitution. So mostly 12 aspects or 12 to 13 aspects, they are, they might ask, they have asked or they might ask. One is that presidential veto, Indian and the other countries, president elections, parliament and parliamentary procedures, they can ask about that. Fourth is federalism, compare Indian federalism with federalism of XYZ country. Secularism is another area that they can ask. CAG, important constitutional body, and there is too much variation between, let's say, the CAG powers in India and some other countries. Then you have fundamental rights or individual rights. They can go for in comparison, India and the rest of the countries. Judiciary and in the whole process of judicial appointment, because again there is wide difference between Indian and the other countries. Then electoral process is another thing. Then they can ask how our electoral process in India different from, let's say, now so many countries are going through elections, France, England. Then you have the Attorney General, again a very important body, and plus there is a lot of difference between the powers that Attorney General have in India and Attorney General that we have in different parts of the world. Vice President is another area. Speaker, again too much difference between what we have in India and in other countries. And if you talk about countries, at least go through UK, US, France, Germany, Australia, Canada, right, Japan, and South Africa. I think these are the 8 countries I believe that they can ask questions from, because these are more of them, democracies which are similar to India. Now, similarly, 6th, Panchayati Raj. Again, a very, very important topic, probable topic. Every year they ask either from Panchayati Raj or they ask from urban local governance. Last year they asked from urban local governance. So this year they will likely to ask from Panchayati Raj. Right. So Panchayati Raj mein pura, all that. You can't really expect to write generic answer from a topic as important as Panchayati Raj. So prepare very, very good notes, case studies, value additions, data, state level best practices. All that should be there in your notes, right? And all these suggestions of various experts, committees can be also used here. Similarly, federalism, again one question mostly guaranteed from this area, so prepare it really well. Interstate border dispute is something that is in news recently. Interstate water dispute is a never going dispute, can be asked by UPSC. Then they can go into the theory part. Why is Indian federalism called as quasi-federalism? Then you have to prepare examples which justify cooperative federalism in India, competitive federalism in India, and confrontation, traditional federalism in India, confrontation between center and the state, right? Then special category states, it's going very much in news, Bihar, Andhra, right? The whole government is actually dependent on this, right? Then, international best practices that we have, comparison, go through that, what good practices of federalism we can incorporate from other countries of the world that can be used in the way forward. Then again, various committees, suggestions. Then this is another area, centralizing tendencies of the government. Then, misuse of investigating agencies as a threat to federalism. Again, this could be a good theme or important theme for this year's mains. Then important doctrines of Supreme Court. Again, that is something which has been asked by UPSC again and again. So just at least go through that. If there is any judgment and any example of that, you can ultimately do that. But at least itna detail mein nahi jana, but at least you should be aware what this doctrine actually means, so that you can actually attempt and write a decent answer, right? Then you have parliament and state legislature. Again, one question can be expected from this area. These are very high probable topics, but you don't have to miss for sure. And at least you should have best notes for these topics. And you should at least have written good answers, practiced good answers for these topics. So here also, amendment power of parliament, how Supreme Court keeps a check. RP Act, again, very famous. Functioning of parliamentary standing committee, data on parliamentary functioning ordinance, data on criminalization of politics, relevance of Rajya Sabha, role of speaker, anti-defection. These are very, very, burning issues. Parliamentary control over executive, parliamentary privilege. This was very much in news with Mahua Motra case, ethics committee and all. Go through that. Then UCC, Uniform Civil Committee, ethics committee, we had already asked the question in prelims, right? Then ultimately anti-defection, women reservation. So these are things that you need to go through that. Now certain keywords which you can use in your polity answers to get that extra marks. So I'll keep on. I'll keep on, sharing these keywords with you throughout this. This is just the first lecture. So in other sessions also, I'll share the keywords. So for example, this is a keyword, decentralization of democracy. We ended up with decentralization of corruption. Can be used in Panchayati Raj. Similarly, in welfare schemes, you can use this keyword. A nation is not just a territory. A nation is its people. Only when people progress, nation progresses. So ultimately, in welfare schemes, we can use this keyword that, it's ultimately the people progress that should be keyword. Then this question, this keyword, mere threat to public order cannot be a ground to suppress freedom of expression. Can be used in sedition, censorship, protest related questions. Anything like Article 19 wale jo questions honge, you can use this. Then technology has made each of us both a simulator and broadcaster of information. Can be used in fake news, right? This can be used actually as an introduction also in the questions of fake news, hate speech, right? Similarly, in right to protest, we can use this question or this phrase: public spaces cannot be occupied indefinitely. People have right to mobility. Similarly, in right to protest, again we can use this Article 19 should be balanced with Article 51. Similarly, Article 21, we can use this quote by Jagdish Bhagwati that it embodies the constitutional value of supreme importance in a democratic society. Similarly, UCC ka I have told you, a unified nation does not necessarily need to have a uniformity. Similarly, ultimately constitutional conventions is a keyword that can be used in questions related to governor, president, speaker, right? Similarly, rights accrue automatically to him who duly performs his duty can be a good phrase that can be used in questions linked to fundamental rights. Then checks and balances, again you can use it for SOP. Principle of subsidiarity can be used in federalism related questions, keyword. Popular sovereignty, again a good keyword. Distributive justice could be used in questions of reservation, questions of welfare schemes, right? Then if the question is asked about Indian Constitution, not a blind copy adapted to Indian circumstances. Indian Constitution is not a blind copy, it is adapted to Indian circumstances. Similarly, empower vulnerable sections, again a good keyword. Deepens democracy, again a good keyword. Substantive democracy, our aim, this could be used in the conclusion that these steps will transform India from being a representative democracy to substantive democracy, right? Similarly, cancel culture, again a very good keyword that we are using. This is again a good keyword you can use for many questions where there is a provision or there could be chances or cases of misuse. For example, dowry laws, defamation laws, right? Many such laws are there, right? So here you can use, sedition laws. Mere misuse is not a reason good enough to render a law unconstitutional. So here after that you will follow it up with what? With reforms, that instead of declaring the law unconstitutional, we should actually go for the reform part, right? Similarly, bridge institutional gaps, again a good keyword. Lack of objectivity in selection could be used in constitutional bodies or statutory bodies that we have. Then this is a good keyword, can be used in the questions linked to Parliamentary Standing Committee. Congress in session is Congress on public display, whereas Congress in its committee rooms is Congress at work. So could be used in the conclusion of the question. We are actually compiling more of these things and we will provide you the PDF very soon. This is just an example, right? Similarly, now let's talk about governance. See, it's very much important if you write the case name, but if you don't remember the case name, then ultimately you can write that. But it's very important to remember it. Otherwise, definitely the impact will be little limited. Okay, na? Acha, so governance may again let's start with the template first. So we have introduction first, template of answer writing. So introduction में you have to start with what? You have to start with, either you can start with definition. Many of these governance topics you have clear cut definition. For example, citizen charter, the question is asked, social audit question is asked. You have to start by first defining what exactly is social audit, what exactly is citizen charter, right? Or you can start with data report index. Now here when we talk about data report index, in the introduction part in governance, the data or report or the index that you will quote will be the general data. The general data. For example, let's say if the question is asked about women, you will start with the gender gap index that we have. India's ranked this much. So introduction part mein the data will be the general data of that sector, not the specific data but the general data, right? Then recent context, again most of the things that are asked in governor, they are mostly in news. So you can start also by the recent context. Then history also, sometimes you can start with that evolution part, that this was started in this kind of era. Acts under which the body is established. For example, let's say if competition commission with the question is asked, so you have to mention that competition commission was established under this act of the parliament, right? So you can start with that also. Similarly, Supreme Court judgment, again very very important, just like in polity. For example, again health pay, paid news pay, कोई भी अगर चीज पे है, तो you can start with, for example, right to repair, right? So ultimately you can start by mentioning that in recent judgment what Supreme Court or High Court has highlighted. So this is another thing which is there. Similarly, these are the 5 things you can use for introduction in governance. Mostly introduction in governance is simple. Now main body in governance is little, the template is different from that of polity. Polity mein, we have methods of constitutional approach, society approach. Here, if we talk about in main body, there are 4 or 5 or 6 types of template that you can use in the main body. So first is similar to what we have discussed in the polity, which is breaking the question according to the keywords. So in the same way we have discussed in polity with respect to that, if you find any keyword, democracy, social justice, if you find any keyword, and what you do, you break it down, the keyword, you break down the keyword and then you link it with the context in which the question is asked. Similarly, in governance also, you have the scope for that. So if you have a keyword like good governance, so here what you can do is that you can break the keyword and then you kind of prove that how these above keyword features are being fulfilled by that instrument, by that body. For example, Citizen Charter is an ideal instrument to promote good governance, but it has its own limitations. Identify the limitations and suggest measures for greater effectiveness of the Citizen Charter, right? So the whole idea here is that you have to break the keyword. The keyword here is good governance. The keyword here is good governance. Now what are the features of good governance? Accountability, transparency, responsiveness, right, efficiency, right? These are the keywords which are the features of good governance. Now what you will do, through examples you will explain how Citizen Charters promotes these features of good governance. How does it promote transparency through example? How does it promote accountability? How does it promote responsiveness? How does it promote efficiency? So that's how you will technically prove that Citizen Charter actually promotes good governance. So let's say any question, if it's asked, any body, how does it promote, how competition commission promotes good governance in India. If the keyword is good governance, social justice, then definitely you can actually, break the answer, right? The second template that we can use in governance answers. When the question is asked about any scheme, when the question is asked about any policy, right, any scheme, any policy with respect to development sector, vulnerable sector and poverty, then what you can do, you have two kinds of approaches, two kinds of templates that you can use in your answer. For example, this was the question asked by the UPSC. Reforming the government delivery system through the DBT scheme is a progressive step, but it has its limitations too. This was asked by the UPSC. Now, to answer this question, we can have two kinds of approaches. The first approach is this approach, which is you divide the issues with the scheme from three sides: administrative side, beneficiary side and outcome related. So any scheme, if you talk about issues, there are only three kind of issues which are there. Administrative side say, if you talk about DBT scheme, we have back-end issue, we have Aadhaar dependence, we have lack of financial inclusion, the technical infrastructure is poor. Beneficiary side say digital literacy is bad, mobile connectivity is bad, there is lack of awareness, there are social gaps, transaction cost is involved, and outcome related talks about the data, real data, that exactly how it has impacted, what are the issues in its achievements of targets, right? So this is one template that you can use when the question is asked about any scheme, policy, initiative with respect to development, welfare scheme, vulnerable sector, poverty related scheme, right? The second template that you can use is the template of PTDU, planning, targeting, delivery, planning stage, targeting stage, delivery stage and usage stage. These are the four stages that we have: planning, targeting, delivery and uses. Let's apply this kind of template to any scheme. For example, let's say if the question is asked on midday meal scheme, right? So midday meal scheme में planning stage में, when you are planning a policy, what are the problems that are involved? So probably the fund that is allocated might not be enough. Probably the areas, for example, PDS, we don't have many of these things that are rich in micronutrients. They are not part of the PDS. That is a fault with planning of the scheme, right? Then infrastructure, probably they have not planned that how many shops or how many how much ration will be needed for this scheme. That's the planning stage. Second stage is targeting stage. Now you have to target, you have to identify where you have to implement the policy. So here also there are various issues involved, what we call as inclusion error, exclusion error, right? Fake enrollment की problem है, data is problem है, social inclusion is a problem that certain people are not targeted. Then third is delivery stage. Now that you have planned the scheme, you have done the targeting, you have identified the people who you will give the services to. Now the third stage is delivery stage. So ultimately there could be problems of corruption, leakages, there could be problem of supply chain disruption, poor infra, right? And last is the usage stage. So here ultimately now the end use, what are the issues with end use? For example, you have ration supplied to midday meal that is of inferior quality. You have a problem of caste discrimination there, that people from lower caste, they are being made to sit in a thing. There is an issue with cook, right? There is an issue with all these wastage, lack of storage, right? So that is how, if there is any delivery scheme, if there is any welfare scheme, you can think from this direction also. So you have two kind of templates. One is the administrative side, beneficiary side and outcome related template. One is this side. Now the whole idea is that the reason why I am saying this is, this will actually broaden your thinking process. So even with schemes or policies where you don't actually have much, information, let's say, through these templates, you will be able to generate 7-8 points. And that's what is important. Rather than leaving the battle, it's very important that you try something, right? So that is there. Now, third way is, so if now we are back to the general kind of, governance template. So when we talk about significance, when you talk about main body, you will write significance, right? How that, just the similar manner we have talked about in polity. Main body will have significance, challenges, way forward, and conclusion is separate. So in the significance part of the answer in governance, you can take good governance value approach. The similar manner we have done in the polity, we took the constitutional value approach. So in the same way, we will be taking the good governance value approach here, which would mean that when you think about any body, any act, any policy, any scheme, think from that perspective, that how that scheme, policy, institution is promoting transparency. If it's promoting transparency, you can write it promotes transparency, accountability, efficiency, equity, inclusiveness, consensus oriented, and effectiveness, right? So these are the values of good governance that we have. Now you can see, okay, this is one thing. So ultimately, for example, if the question is asked on social audit or probably citizen charter or probably Karma Yogi initiative, Mission Karma Yogi, you can think from that. When we talk about significance, you can generate points from here. 3-4 points, so you can easily, generate by thinking in this direction, right? Similarly, in their significance part, you have to also add, again, case study, best practice and data, which is again very, very important. Every point in governance, very, very important, should be collaborated with an example. At least in 80% of the points that you are writing, it should be collaborated with an example. Keywords you have to add in your governance answers. For example, women pe question hai to pink colorization ho gaya, glass ceiling ho gaya. So these keywords need to be there in your answers in the main body. Otherwise, it will be problematic. Then, if you talk about conclusion mein again there are 5 different types of, there are 5 different or 6 different types of conclusion that we can use in governance. The first is similar to polity, DPSP goal se you can end. Article 38 can be applicable in many governance questions. SDG goal is another thing that is very important with respect to governance. For example, the question is asked on health, education, malnutrition. So you can always link it with SDG 1, SDG 3, SDG 6, right? So SDG goals is a very common way of concluding your answer in governance. Then agenda of the government, very applicable in governance. It is not that applicable in polity, but in governance you will have scope in many questions to actually use this. For example, minimum government, maximum governance, this is good keyword. Panch Pran, smart governance. Smart means simple, moral, accountable, responsive and transparent governance. So you mention the way forward and then you mention that these reforms will go a long way in promoting smart governance in India, which means simple, moral, accountable, responsive and transparent government. Similarly, Kartavya Path, Karam Yogi, all these are keywords. If the question is asked on civil servant, you can mention how these above reforms will ensure that civil servants follow the Kartavya Path, right? Or they transform into Karam Yogi as desired by the Indian government, right? Similarly, third way you can end your answer in this is target of the sector. For example, if the question is asked on education, health, so what you can do is you can end up by saying that these steps will help in realizing the targets of national health policy, which is XYZ. Or if the question is asked on higher education, you can end up by saying that how these methods or these reforms can help us in achieving the goal of 50% gross enrollment ratio in higher education by 2035. So that can also be done. Similarly, you can also end up with key governance principles, like the same way we talked up, in polity. Thus, like value of accountability, transparency, tolerance. One good thing is last mile connectivity, bottoms up approach. These are good keywords that can be used in conclusion. For example, question is asked on SSG. What will SSG do? SSG will promote. It is based on a bottom up approach. Microfinance and DLS, District Legal Service Authority. What it does? It promotes last mile connectivity. You can say thus the above reforms in microfinance will help us in achieving its goal of providing last mile connectivity to the citizens. Okay. Then the keywords like participative governance could be used for NGO, civil society organization. Thus, these above reforms will go a long way in promoting, in ensuring that NGO promotes participative governance in India, right? Then people-centric governance, again, good keyword, can be used in conclusion, right? Yes, this PDF will be provided to all the students of Sure Shot and Step Up. People-centric governance. So ultimately, if you talk about e-governance, you can end up by saying that thus these reforms will ensure that, people-centric, the value of or the idea of people-centric governance is achieved. Okay, na? Now let's discuss how to make notes for governance. Mostly similar, but there are certain differences. So if we talk about the introduction part, so again, you need to have data for introduction, because anything you introduce, you have to back it up with data. Also, you can have flowcharts that can be used in the introduction part. For example, good governance, citizen charter, all these things, you can have a flowchart in your notes that you can directly replicate in your answers. After writing, let's say after a data or something, you can then draw a flowchart, right? So that can be done. Similarly, if we talk about the main body, now main body, if we talk about data, governance is all about data, right? Governance is all about data, so you have to substantiate, you have to write as many data as that, and that should be there in your notes, because वो notes में रहेगा तभी replicate होगा. See, you have 5 or 6 data on a topic in governance, 2 or 3 case studies or examples. You can definitely write a good answer with this much information. So first thing is data of disparity that you need to have, which is rural, urban, male, female, regional, right? I think that is, for example, online education, we have disparity between rural India and urban India, between male and female, right? So one is the data of disparity from that topic, whatever topic you are making notes in governance, just ensure that you have data of disparity. Then second is data of international comparison. So what is the status in India compared to what is the status in some other developed countries and some other countries that are not so developed but emerging economies. So we'll have a comparison of Brazil, let's say South Africa, let's say Mexico, right? Third, data of social, economic and political dimensions, if there is any link to any group. So for example, if the question is asked on women, we'll talk about the social, economic and political empowerment data of that group. So these 3 kinds of data, so you should have, in the main body, for the main body, when we are preparing for governance topics. Similarly, phrase for main body, you should also have some phrases for main body, which those keywords which can be inculcated in the answer. For example, NGO called as the 4th frontier of warfare, Ajit Dova. So in a similar way, for every governance topic, should have at least 1 or 2 keywords that can be used in the main body of the answer. Then thirdly, if there is any scheme, it's at least the major schemes, the main schemes, the probable schemes, you can analyze that in the PTDU format. That you can directly replicate in your answers there. The planning, targeting, delivery and user stage that I have explained earlier. So, if you can have 1, 2 points from all of them, then definitely you have good way to actually, write the answer. Then case studies, again, very, very important. As many cases, see now things have been so much democratized with the emergence of Google Bard, Chat GPT. It's so easy now. And that's very important. That's what I'm saying. That 2-3 years back, I've been mentoring for almost 9 years now. 2-3 years back, you hardly had 1 copy out of 10 where you have these case studies and data, and you know that he will be a ranker. But now things have, the competition has improved significantly. Now, because information has been so much democratized, that now, and it's so accessible now, and now almost 10, may say 8 answers where you see that. So the idea is that you have to, this is something that you can't miss. Without case studies and data, whatever structure or innovation you use, you will definitely score average marks, right? So for every topic that you're preparing, should have good case studies and data. Then legal and constitutional provisions of that topic. For example, if you're preparing for women, transgender, hate speech, any of these governance topics, should have that what are the legal provisions with respect to that, what are the constitutional provisions with respect, that should also be part of your notes. Then also the schemes, then if there's any international declaration with respect to that topic, you should have a note of that. You can quote that in your answers. For example, this Beijing declaration for, women. SDG goal linked to that, again, that can also be added. Then you have committee's recommendation. Of course, this is obvious that you need to have that in your notes. Then you have conclusion ke liye. So you should have phrases, as I've said, health for all, jo maine phrases aapko bataye hain. Make a list of that in your notes and use it wherever it's applicable. Then you have declarations, SDG goal and sector specific targets. Health may primary education, secondary education, similarly health may be, education may be. So that's how you will, prepare your notes. At least your notes should have this much information. Agar ye nahi hai, then it means that your notes, you need to update your notes. And I have been saying that again and again, that good notes is a success too. It's a key, it's a keys to success, UPSC success. Now let's talk about the most probable top themes for governance. So first is education. Mostly, if you have analyzed the PYQs, every year they're asking one question from education, be it national education policy, be it earning by learning scheme, every year one question they're asking from education. So education, you have to prepare really, really well. And these are certain issues I believe that you should have information about so that you can write a good answer in education related questions. So for example, if we talk about primary education, so data on access, learning outcomes, affordability, ASAR survey you have to write, you have to be prepared very well. Steps taken by the governments, all these schemes, best practices, India and the world, and you have to integrate all of them with new education. So they can ask the question in the context of new education policy, right? Similarly, if we talk about higher education, so issue of employability is there, skill development is there. Then you have to, international best practices of higher education that we need. Foreign campus in India, that is also a debate that has been going on. Issue of research in India, that's an issue that's going on. Autonomy of higher education, again an important issue. Various committees' recommendations. Online education issue, how it is creating divide, feasibility. Medical education, issues there. Cheating in competitive exam, again a emerging issue. Teacher shortage and teacher training, these are again very, very important probable topics for this year. Similarly, if you talk about literacy rates, so this is something that you have to at least prepare for this year's mains. Overall literacy rates in India, gender disparities, rural urban, so you need to have data on that. Disparities by socio-economic group, again you need to have data for that. Efforts to improve literacy and digital divide in literacy. These are the key themes with literacy in India that you need to prepare for this year mains. Similarly, health sector की अगर हम बात करें, again primary health पे, again one question is always asked from health. So primary health, so data on access, quality, affordability, NFHS का पूरा data अच्छे से, national health policy you have to kind of study. They can ask because they have asked one question on national education policy, so they can ask on this also. National digital health mission, preventive healthcare is emerging topic. Best practices, that is again you have to prepare. Tertiary healthcare, again this is an important topic. Telemedicine, threat of non-communicable disease and lifestyle diseases, again an important topic. Then healthcare as a legal right, so Rajasthan model, this is another area that you can prepare well. Healthcare to PPP model, again an emerging issue that has been there. Then you have the various committees. Mental health issue, again a very, very important issue. Child healthcare, because they have asked question on maternal and geriatric healthcare, so they can ask specific kind of healthcare, probably child healthcare, mental healthcare, so they can ask on those specific kind of things. Lifestyle disease, again it's a specific kind of disease. Malnutrition, SDG goal related to healthcare and India's progress on it. This again is a very important topic. And linkage of healthcare towards realizing demographic dividend, Viksit Bharat, etc. Then third important issue is hunger and malnutrition. Again, a very, very important issue. Very, very important. The reason being that, again, one question you can be sure that will be asked from it. So here also, all that hidden hunger, multidimensional poverty index, issues with poverty alleviation schemes in India, issues with hunger schemes, data on wasting, stunting, state level best practice, initiatives of the government. So all these things you need to prepare. Then NGO, CSO and pressure group. इससे एक सवाल पक्का आना है इस बार भी. So NGO में how does NGO promote those keywords? How does NGO promote democracy, social justice, good governance, inclusive growth? So you have to prepare your answers in this direction. The keywords, right? Economic justice, political justice, right? And how does they weaken democracy in India? That is also another theme that you have to prepare. Then accountability of pressure group, NGO and civil society. Difference between pressure group of India and the West, right? Challenges faced by them. So they had asked this question on farmers pressure group few years back. So this time they might ask on business pressure group and its influence on the Indian government, right? Then international best practices is another area that they can ask. Accountability of NGO, right? So, and also rural, urban and sectoral divide with NGO. So these are the areas that they can ask. Then SSG and microfinance, again, they have not asked the question last year. So there is a very high chance that they might ask a question this year from either SSG or microfinance, right? So one theme is that how is a tool to reduce poverty, illiteracy, malnutrition, evolution of SSG in India, role in women empowerment, social justice, role of microfinance in inclusive growth, issues faced, NABARD report. So all these things, best practices and all, you have to, prepare for this year mains. Then welfare schemes. Again, one question is guaranteed every year. They ask from welfare scheme, either from a specific welfare scheme or they ask in general, what are the problems with welfare scheme? So यहाँ पे भी issues faced by them, welfare scheme, how welfare schemes are unable to reach women, SC, ST, steps taken by them. Last year they asked question how these schemes are, promoting discrimination and all. Lack of convergence among the welfare schemes. Some key welfare schemes you also need to prepare. So then civil services, they have not asked a question in last 2 years. So again, very high chance that they will ask a question on civil services this year for sure. So again, यहाँ पे भी importance of civil services, how its role is changing, the recent debates, lateral entry, generalist versus the specialist debate, right? New public governance, how does civil servants promote good governance, social justice, democracy, right? How does, the issue with neutrality and professionalism of them. So all these, Karma Yogi, various committees, so these are things that you need to study. Similarly, uh, you know, uh, citizen chart is another topic that UPSC has not asked from last 3 years. So again, a very probable topic, because every 3-4 years ke gap mein they have been asking this. So this year they might ask questions from, see, if you see the analysis, the themes are very limited only. Broader themes are very limited. They are doing what they are doing, they are repeating these themes again and again. Then lastly, we come to the keywords that can be used in governance answers. Again, this is not an exclusive list. We are preparing more and we will share that list with you in some time. So Karma Yogi can be used in civil servants. Agents of change, good keyword. Nari Shakti can be used in women question. Sahkarita se Samriddhi, good keyword. Good keyword that can be used in questions of cooperative society. Then Jan Bhagidari spirit, again a good thing. Last mile and bottoms up approach, again a good keyword. Participative governance, good keyword. Citizen centric governance, ethical governance, these are all good keywords that can be used in your answers. Then holistic development, right? Digital empowerment, technological inclusivity, integrity in public services, power devolution, empowerment of marginalized communities, policy driven governance, effective implementation, right? Evidence based policy making, good keyword, can be used, right? Corruption is the enemy of development and of good governance, good keyword, good phrase. Technology transforms governance, it empowers citizens and make governance more efficient. Transparency is a currency of good governance, again good things, right? Can be used in the introduction, can be used in the conclusion. Team India is a partnership between the center and the state, right? The mantra of our government is reform, perform and transform. This was used by Prime Minister Modi, right? Health for all. Sarvodaya, Sarvodaya is again welfare of all, right? Then Yogakshema, that is used in Arthashastra, prosperity and happiness of the citizens. Smart governance, Panchpran, rule based and not role based. This can be used in the case of civil services. Dignity and human rights, again a good keyword, right? So ultimately, these are certain keywords that you can use in your governance answers. Okay? So we'll provide you the list of that. We are also making a document where we'll be providing you some best practices, some case studies, some data also, so that your effort is reduced. So I have also asked most of my last year rankers who have got into IS, they are providing me with the notes. So I'm trying to compile these notes, trying to make them more what we call relevant, updating the data, and then I'll be sharing a lot of these notes with you. So I think this is all we have from my side. Now doubts and questions. Yes.
So do we need to write the full form of acronyms like smart governance or 4C for federalism, because that takes a lot of space?
It's better to write. It's better to write. See, if you are short of space and time, then avoid it. But if you're in a comfort zone, then write it. Right? But definitely it will not backfire you much. The whole idea is that it looks better if you explain everything. Otherwise, also it's relevant. See, rather than writing nothing, it's better to write something. Right? So, should we always write way forward? We should write way forward if it's a 15 marker always. It's a 10 marker, then if it's not asked, sometimes you can combine way forward and conclusion together. Yes.
For example, there is a question on demographic like So we have two options, like we can start with the definition. We also have like some context and the data also.
So you can also have an option that you can combine two of them. So you can start with either defining and then give a data. Three lines में हो जाएगा. 2 line definition, 1 line data, 3 to 4 lines. So then it can go more than 3 lines, but you can also combine. It's not really, see, so one thing I forget to tell, that out of these 7, 8 approaches I am telling, sometimes you also can combine 2 of them. Right? So it's not like कि सिर्फ एक ही use करना है एक बार में. You can combine also 2 of them. Right? Tail words में there is another lecture schedule. Out of those 10 lectures, we have 1 lecture which is specifically dedicated on tail words. Yes, Twinkle, you have to make 1-pager notes for all the topics that are mentioned in your syllabus.
So when we are drawing charts or we are using headings, do we need to like explain everything, whatever is mentioned in the chart?
In the flow chart? No.
If we are making a flow chart, like in governance, putting in some jargons there, we need to explain.
No, you don't have. That's a non-core part. That is why you're doing it. Otherwise, so you could have just mentioned that through points. The reason why using a flowchart is that that's a non-core part. You just have to tell them that these are the features. You don't have to explain the features, because you will end up saving a lot of your time. I mean, you'll waste a lot of your time.
In governance introduction, you said like you can start with a chart also.
After data, you can go for a chart. You can't start with a chart per se. Yes, let's say 2 liner data and then chart, right? Also, one more thing which I forget to tell you, that you can also, especially in polity also, you can also, after introduction, you can draw that chart, right? For example, let's say parliament, how the productivity is, parliament is declining, how the productivity of departmental standing committee is declining. So that also you can have that in your notes also. You have that chart ready, which you can directly replicate in your actual answers also. Yes.
How many words should be allocated to introduction?
I'll just 3 to 4 lines, not more than that. If it's a 15 marker, you can go up to 5 lines. But it's a 10 marker, 3 to 4 lines, not more than that. Right. Yes, all the people who are enrolled in Short Mains and Step Up will get the PDF. Don't worry. I'll give you the PDF. See, criminalization of politics in? See, now that depends on whether it's a 10 marker or it's a 15 marker. If it's a 15 marker, then using a flowchart, again I'm saying core, non-core. This is a non-core part, because this is not exactly asked in the question, but because it's a 15 marker, so you have to give some kind of context. So introduction ke baad you draw a flowchart and mention the reasons for criminalization. Just mention the reasons, don't elaborate on it, and then move to the core part, that is the key demand. Right? If it's a 10 marker, then you can also skip that part. You can directly come to the main demand, because you are already short of space and time. Right? How to tackle time constraint during mains. So to tackle time constraint, 3 things are important. One, that you have good notes, 1-pager notes, which you can revise again and again. Second, you need to have template, so that you don't have to think on the spot much. And third, practicing the answer writing. These 3 things will help you in finishing the paper on time. There is no other solution.
When we are writing the conclusion or way forward, can we go objectively proposing our own view in a radical way, something, if the question is like that, like criminalization of politics? If I suppose give a way forward which is like banning or something, I'm just saying then is it valid to write it like that, or we should be diplomatic? Or
No, at least it should be it should not be very radical. Say somehow moderate approach is needed, right? You can't give an extreme solution, right? That life imprisonment for something.
Even if it has some backing, like some judgment or something, then also we should not write about it.
Try to be more moderate, I would say. More extreme approach is not preferred, because you have to play safe. The examiner who might be checking your copy might be of a very different opinion. So that can backfire if you're writing extreme kind of suggestion. So it's always better to write a more of a moderate approach, so that you're playing both the sides, right? Huh? Huh? Yeah, middle class is over. Okay. So I think,
So do we need substantiation in every point? For example, like constitutional bodies like NCST, we say that there is financial crunch or staff crunch. So we don't have the data for that. So do we need to always write the data?
no, see, if you don't have the data, then there is no point of writing. Na? But you just elaborate that we have this. But one thing, just avoid that, especially in polity and in governance. It's little different from, I would say, GS paper 3, which I'll explain in the next lecture also. That polity में ना थोड़े से लंबे points चल सकते हैं. It can be valid if you are writing a two line or a 3 line point, especially in polity. But in economics or in GS3, it should be more kind of crisp points. So what many people do, the mistake which I see is that they write very small points. Sometimes they look like notes. So these are not your notes, these are your answers, right?
Can we go with the paragraph approach in certain kind of questions which require argumentation?
Paragraph approach is only valid when you don't have enough content. So to fool the examiner, you have to go paragraph. Otherwise, if you go by point format, then you will be exposed. You don't have points. So paragraph में कहानी लिख दो कुछ ना कुछ तो he'll get to know and he'll ठीक है यार 2 number तो दे देते हैं. So only when you don't know enough points, then go for paragraph approach, right? Yes, of course, valid in all. If you don't know much about the topic, fool the examiner, right? That's how you go. Yes. Okay.